Welcome to the Start Something Show. Join world-renowned experts, change agents, and everyday folks who have done the amazing. All here to help you start something incredible. Now it's time to step out, live your perfect day, and create a legacy with your host, Tina Dietz.
Hello, Superstarters. It's Tina Dietz. Welcome to another episode of the Start Something Show. Today on the show, we are welcoming Robert MacPhee in a little while here. And Robert is the former director of training for the Jack Canfield organization, not on the chicken soup for the soul side of the business, but the success principles side of the business. But even more than that, Robert is an incredibly accomplished consultant, author, speaker, coach, and has worked with folks from all around the globe, organizations like Google and Qualcomm, as well as restaurant chains like Denny's and Jack in the Box, Dartmouth College, and everything in between. He's going to be sharing with us today some very, very important information on making excellent decisions, something that affects each and every one of us every single day. Really cool stuff. But before we get to that, it is time for our tech tip of the month. And this month, it is not so much a business tip as it is a travel and life tip, something that I use for my children, my husband, and I when we're traveling. I also do use it for business, doing business internationally. And this is a language learning website called Memrise, Memrise. It is a free website. It is community sourced, and it has more than 300,000 courses on it. You can learn any language in the world pretty much on this website for free. And it is available for PC. It's available for Mac. You can use it on a desktop. You can use it on your phone or your tablet. Very, very cool resource for learning language, whether you want to get into the nitty-gritty of learning language or you just want to go somewhere on vacation or for a business trip and be able to use a couple of key phrases to be able to get around wherever you're going in Europe or Africa for that matter. So check it out. Really cool. Our tech tip of the month, memrise.com. Today's Superstarters, I am happy to welcome Robert MacPhee to the show. Robert is the founder and president of Heartset Incorporated, which is out of San Diego, California, but has a beautiful global reach. And Robert is focused on helping organizations faced with significant changes, really helping their people sustain or improve their productivity in spite of those changes. And Robert is the author of a book and the partner journal, I love this title, Manifesting for Non-Gurus, How to Quickly and Easily Attract Lasting Results. And he's also the former director of training with the Canfield Training Group, where for many years he worked directly with Jack Canfield, the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series and the author of the Success Principles. He's also a founding member of the Transformational Leadership Council, a very cool organization. And Robert is also very committed to helping people make the right decisions in life and make powerful decisions. He's super knowledgeable, he's fun, he's engaging, and his client list is quite amazing. He's worked with Google, Qualcomm, Coldwell Bankers, Jack in the Box, Dartmouth College, Keller Williams. It just goes on and on and on. And really what he's all about is making sure that people are getting the results that they're committed to, getting those results quickly and easily, and making sure the changes are sustainable. You can find out all kinds of good stuff about Robert, including more about his book, Manifesting for Non-Gurus, at robertmacphee.com. And of course, you can find that information on the show notes. Robert, thanks for starting something with me today.
You are welcome. I'm thrilled to be here. And thanks for the lavish introduction.
I like to be lavish. You know, I like to load it on.
Nothing quite as engaging as hearing yourself introduced. I love that.
Yeah, you know what? It's always interesting to be on the receiving end of it, too, you know?
Mm.
It's like, oh, he did do all that stuff, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, you've had quite a ride in the world of training, in the world of attraction. You've been privy to a lot of the rise of this whole really conscious entrepreneurial movement over the last bunch of years. Why don't you give me an idea, like when did you really decide to change your life and start something?
Well, I think in terms of the work that I'm doing now, it really goes back to when I first graduated from college. A good friend of mine and I started a little business on the side. It was supposed to just be a summer job. We actually created a parking company. We were doing valet parking for restaurants and hotels and hospitals and that kind of thing. And it took off and kind of started growing like crazy. But, again, it just started as a summer job. And here's two guys who really don't know what they're doing. We're committed to quality and doing things right, but really on some level making it up as we went along. And at one point, our sales were going up, but our profits were going down, which is a very common phenomenon for new business startups when they get to a certain point. And we brought in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People as a management training program. And it wasn't like we brought Stephen Covey in. What we did, because we were just a little tiny company, we actually went to Nightingale Conant and we bought 8 sets of cassette tapes, which was the modality of choice at that time. It's a long time ago.
I remember it well.
And we brought our managers in. We had 8 managers at the time, and we gave them these sets of tapes. And we created an 8-week training program called Listen to One Tape Every Week and We'll Talk About It. And it was phenomenal. It was just amazing how engaging in this conversation about the fundamental principles that are in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People fundamentally changed the culture of our company. And I actually ended up facilitating that program, not necessarily because I was eminently qualified to do so, but mostly because nobody else wanted to do it. But it turned out to be this incredible gift because I loved doing it. I loved the material. I started buying more books and going to workshops and listening to other tapes. And I just became totally enthralled with this personal and professional development material that was out there. That was how I connected to Jack Canfield and his work and ended up working really closely with Jack. But it really started with running a small business, bringing personal, professional development material in as part of building our culture, and really just getting so engaged in it myself that over a period of time, I transitioned into doing more and more and finally only that kind of work.
Wow. So now, as you were developing all of this work and then moving into working with the Canfield Training Group, tell me a story of one of your favorite failures. Like, what was maybe just kind of an epic fail that you had that you then had to, that changed the way that you did things in the future?
Well, I'll tell you that one of the things that really, it didn't quite get to the point of being an epic fail, but we were right on the precipice, was right at that point with our parking business where we had grown it to a certain point, but it was absolutely headed in the wrong direction. We were bringing in a lot of money. I tell people we were like drug dealers. We'd go to the bank every Monday morning with bags of cash because it was that kind of business. The bank wondered what the heck we were up to. But, it looked on the surface like things were going really well. But the reality was we were making less and less money. We had more and more expenses and costs involved. And we were absolutely headed in the direction of going out of business. And if it wasn't for reaching out and getting help from other people and really looking at different ways of doing things, that business, which has since, it's pretty incredible. My partner actually bought me out years ago, but he kept going with it and ended up selling the business to an international company. This little parking company that we started on 3 restaurants on the beach in San Diego is now actually owned by a company that's based out of, I think it's Denmark. So you just never know. But if we hadn't been willing to really ask for some help and get some help at that point of things absolutely headed in the wrong direction, there's no way that ever would have happened.
What were some of the changes that you as a company or your management team decided to implement out of that experience working with the 7 Habits materials?
Well, there were 2. One is we made the 7 Habits material really a part of our culture. The other material that we brought in that I think was really critical, and I've done it several times since with other businesses that I've been involved in, despite the fact that there's often real resistance to doing it, was something called open book management, where we made the decision, even though we were dealing with a very young workforce, a very kind of immature workforce in many ways, because we had a lot of employees, but most of them were young men between the ages of about 18 and 20 who were working for us. But we made the decision to open up our books and to let them know exactly how much money we were making and where we were doing well and where we were not doing well. And what we found was that there were some huge misconceptions on the front lines of our business about how much money the company was making. They saw all the money coming in, but they never saw all the expenses and liabilities that were incurred. And so by opening up our books and letting them know exactly how much money we were making and where it, kind of where it came from and where it went, we found that it made a fundamental difference in terms of the honesty and integrity and commitment of our most important people, frontline people, and our managers as well.
Well, it's an interesting shift to make. That kind of transparency. It sounds like it created some additional trust and also accountability because they could actually see the inner workings of it and not be that typical part-time job employee where you're thinking, oh man, I'm, getting the dregs and, management's making all this money and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's true. And again, there was definitely some resistance to it because, as owners of the company and the people who had started the company, we were making more money than the frontline employees. And it was good for us to look in the mirror and really own that and say, you know what? There's a reason why. I mean, we are the ones who started this company. We are the ones who risked something to make this happen. We are the ones who are ultimately, when there's a big south swell down in Mexico and all our employees call in sick because they're out surfing.
They're out surfing.
We're the ones who are here, ultimately responsible for what does or doesn't happen and the satisfaction of our clients. So it was good for us, on the one hand, to really own what we were making and be willing to share it and not feel like it had to be some sort of secret. And it was also good for our employees who really were under the conception that we were making even more than we actually were. So, it was really valuable. And in that case, there was definitely resistance when I've been working with companies since then and encouraged more of an open book. And in some companies, maybe a completely open book isn't the best way to go. But what I have seen over and over again is for most companies, a more open book, being more willing to be open about what's really going on instead of kind of having a be quiet and do your job, don't ask any questions kind of approach is the best way to get people to be really engaged and connected and committed to the work that they're doing.
I can see why that would make such a difference in most of the corporate structures that I've ever been associated with on a personal level. That's for sure. I'd love to see some more of that being infused into that corporate culture. Let's talk about your journey working in training and development then. What's some of your favorite moments from that piece of your history? Because you were involved with the Canfield Training Group really when Jack was at the pinnacle of what he was doing. Still incredibly influential, very well known and highly, highly respected. But at that period of time that you were involved in the training group, it was everywhere. Chicken Soup was everywhere. The Success Principles was everywhere.
Yeah, and Jack really is one of the true leaders in the industry. You talked about what's going on with kind of a global shift. I call it a global shift in consciousness that I really believe is going on. I believe people are showing up differently in their personal lives. I believe people really are looking for more enlightened ways to do business. And it's really exciting, some of the things that are going on. And for me, it's exciting to be around people like Jack and other members of the Transformational Leadership Council who really are on the leading edge of all that. It's really fun and really engaging. In terms of like specific moments, a couple come to mind, and one is actually really recent, but further back, people ask me how I got my position as director of training with the Canfield organization. I was in that position for about 4 years, and people would see me on stage and co-facilitating with Jack, and they'd say, "Oh, I want your job. How do I get your job?" And I'd say, well, what you do is you go back 15 years and you start by volunteering to support Jack at his trainings, and you do that for a while, and then he asks you to take on a small project, and you do that, and one thing leads to another, and 10, 12 years later, you're the director of training. But it doesn't happen overnight. And one of the real pivotal moments in all that was at one point I was asked to take on the leadership role for all of the volunteer assisting teams at his live events. So he does big trainings, and then he does smaller one-day trainings. And what I would do is I would select and lead the volunteer assisting teams that supported those events. And for me, it was a big, big step because I had been on those teams for a long time, and I would be able to just show up and support the work because I was so grateful for what I had received from Jack. I wanted to give back, and then I would go home, and it was pretty easy to do. It was very rewarding and very engaging and very fun and all that, but it was pretty easy. But when I was asked to take on the leadership role, it took it to a whole different level of responsibility for how those teams were run. And I really struggled with whether to take on that responsibility or not. And looking back on it, obviously, I'm really glad I did. But that was one pivotal moment. And then the other one that's really recent is in 2010, I transitioned out to really doing more work on my own. I still do some projects and work with Jack on some things, but for the most part, I'm doing work on my own. And as you mentioned, I have a book called Manifesting for Non-Gurus, which I'm thrilled to hear that you like the title. But one of the things I've learned, one of the things I've learned over the last 4 years is that title really doesn't resonate very well with most of the population. And that although we're talking about a global shift and there are some really exciting things happening, when we're using words like manifesting and non-guru, a lot of the world really isn't ready for that conversation. It's not something that they're really attracted to. And in some sense, there's a lot of resistance to that conversation. People see it as kind of woo-woo and out there and soft skills and not practical and things like that. And anybody who takes a look at my work, they see that it's very practical. It's very results-oriented. It's very common sense. I love to simplify things and make it really easy for people to understand and implement. So it's really not woo-woo. But the title was kind of woo-woo. So one of the other transitions that I'm going through now is actually transitioning from work that has been branded around the book with Manifesting for Non-Gurus to work that is branded around a concept that I call excellent decisions, which is about people making decisions based on their vision and their values rather than making decisions based on all the pressure that we're under, all the external influences that we're surrounded by. I do a lot of work with schools now, and I see students that are making decisions based on peer pressure, parental pressure, academic pressure, social pressure. It's amazing how much pressure these kids are under when they're in school. And in some cases, they're making some really bad decisions. And those bad decisions lead to things like drinking and drugs and sexual assault and bullying and cheating and even as far as suicide, which is, not quite an epidemic, I wouldn't call it, on college campuses. But the statistics are still pretty scary as far as how many suicides we see amongst our young people.
Yeah, as the stress level goes up, it's incredible how much the rate of both anxiety, depression, feelings of social isolation, suicide, all of that is very much in concert with each other, especially with that age group where they're really not cooked yet, as it were, not finished yet in terms of their brain development and
exactly.
And decision making is like one of the last things to develop in humanity. So tell me some more about the excellent decision, because this is something that so many folks come to me and come to other coaches for. Should I do this or should I do that? What direction should I go in? What are some of the, kind of the fundamental keys to making good decisions?
Well, the overarching fundamental that we look at is making decisions based on vision and values versus making decisions based on those external influences. I teach a simple model that shows people how their results come from the actions they take. The actions they take are driven by the thoughts they think, and that the thoughts they're thinking are driven by both all those external influences and by our sense of who we are, our self-awareness, our self-confidence, our self-esteem, our sense of self, what's really important to us. And if we look around us in the world, we see a lot of people whose decisions and actions and thoughts and ultimately results are totally driven by external influences. It's what my wife wants me to do. It's what my friends want me to do. It's what my boss wants me to do. That's what's dictating all my actions. And for many people, no one has ever really stopped and asked them questions like, who are you? And what's really important to you? What are your values? What is the contribution that you want to make? And the excellent decisions work is really all about engaging that conversation, to help people have a really strong sense of self and have that be what's driving their decisions rather than all those external influences. Mm-hmm. And it's so, especially working with students who, have either through their parents or their teachers or their friends have unconsciously been doing a lot of things to wake them up and have them making conscious decisions, and to have them at the same time asking themselves questions like, who am I? What's really important to me? What's my vision? What's the contribution I want to make? And getting answers to that are dictating the decisions that they make, and therefore the actions they take and the results they get is really exciting. And they're so hungry for it. That's, I think, one of the most gratifying things is they really want to be in that conversation. There's a positive psychology class at Harvard University that I was directed to, and it's the most popular psychology class they've ever had at Harvard. It's taught in the largest lecture hall on campus at Harvard, and every time they teach it, it's full beyond, capacity. And what that tells me is that the students want to be engaged in this conversation. They want to be exploring what's really important to them and how they can make a contribution and how their life can matter, instead of just going out drinking with their buddies and, having a good time and partying and making a lot of money and whatever. Those things aren't as important.
Yeah, there is that tipping point when somebody gets into school and they think they're going to be on a certain path. And then the reality is that most folks who start on a certain path don't stay on that path. And it just keeps, dividing and branching off and dividing and branching off as we go along. And sometimes it's as though we're just being swept away rather than consciously, like you say, making powerful decisions.
Right.
So if you were to kind of give us a little piece, a little taste of something that our superstarters could do to kind of interrupt that kind of pattern, to kind of become conscious of if they are in a default setting of making decisions or actually making a powerful decision, what's something that they could do to start bringing some consciousness to that?
Well, I think the simplest thing to do, and it can get very complicated, but on some level it's very simple, is to spend some time with the question, who am I? And what I mean by that, I break it down in my work to the core elements of who am I in terms of the contribution that I want to make, and who am I in terms of what's really important to me. And if people go through their life, whether it's their business or their relationships or their personal life, whatever it is, with a really good awareness of the contribution that they want to make and what they're really good at and what's really important to them, then they're going to just unconsciously and effortlessly make decisions in a different kind of a way. And the interesting thing about the question, who am I, is that when we're put under stress and asked to make decisions, that is the worst time to try and figure out who we really are and what's important to us, because we just don't have the bandwidth to do it. But if we're willing to spend a little time ahead of time with our journal or with someone that we really trust, or by taking a workshop or reading a book or whatever it might be, to really explore this question of who am I and really get clear about what your values and your vision are, then when you get put under stress, the foundation has already been built and you're able to make decisions in a very different way, and chances are create an outcome. I love what you described about, these kids go into school and they head off on a different path, and if it's directed by someone else or if it's directed by some external pressure, they might wake up in their 40s, and I've seen this happen a lot with people who show up at workshops, in their 40s and their 50s, they're doing a job they hate and they're miserable in their relationship and their life isn't working. And it's because they made one of those decisions way, way back that sent them down a path, and, they got into a relationship and got a job, and none of it was really based on a real clarity about what was important to them and the contribution that they wanted to make. So it's fabulous when people can get that early.
It is. It absolutely is. Many years ago, a lot of my listeners don't know this about me, but I actually started out working with teenagers and ran 2 teen leadership centers and worked in high schools and colleges just around this very similar kind of work. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Robert, because it is just so powerful to have our young people starting out with that kind of background. It's like, yes, you need academics are great, training is great, skills are great, but it's the internal resources that allow us to pull us forward for a lifetime.
No question about it. No question about it. And, my oldest daughter actually went to school at Dartmouth back east, which is a great school, and actually went back and did some work with Dartmouth. And I realized while I was back there, even more than I ever saw while my daughter was in school there, how much pressure these kids are under, that the reward for these high school students who are the best of the best is that they get to go and compete with the other high school students that are the best of the best. And, I'm no math whiz, that's actually my daughter, but I know that if you take all of the best and put them together and have them compete with each other, they can't all continue to be the best of the best. And that creates a lot of pressure and a lot of stress for some of those kids. And the question is, are they really equipped to handle it? And in many cases, the answer is no, they're not.
Exactly. And they'll change from that career path simply because their perception is that they can't compete. If they can't be the best, then they'll drop out to somewhere else where they feel like they can.
Yeah. And we see these crazy cases of a straight A student who gets a B and thinks their life is over. And it's like, wait a minute, let's step back and put this in perspective here. You're at Harvard or you're at Dartmouth or you're at Stanford. And if you're getting a B at Stanford, you are still in the top whatever percent of the population here. So
it's all perception. It's all it's that crazy perception that we have, and then, like you said, continues. And then I'm sure you and I both have a number of clients who then come to us, let's say in their 40s, saying, "What happened?
Yeah.
What happened? And how do I, readjust this? And I mean, the good news is you can readjust it, but wow, how much easier to readjust it when you're 20 than when you're 40.
Well, it is easier, and yet at the same time, one of the things I love about sharing that kind of four-part approach that I talked about how our results come from the actions that we take, and our actions are dictated by the way we think, and that ideally our thoughts are driven by our sense of self, by who we really are and what's important to us. Sometimes just understanding that that's what's going on, that's what works. And, I know your audience and your show, your work is very much based on helping people manage change and create the changes that they want in their lives. And sometimes when people recognize that a comfort zone occurs when their results match their belief about who they are, and that they can start by changing their belief about who they are as a way to really be the catalyst to start that change, it can give even people who have been stuck for a long time, it can give them a fresh start, whatever age they are.
That's the beautiful thing about humanity. We can always reinvent ourselves. Robert, thank you so much for joining me here today. And Superstarters, just a reminder that all the things that Robert and I talked about today, you can find on his show notes page on the startsomethingshow.com, along with you can download this, you can listen to it on iTunes, you can listen to it on Stitcher, and you can get all of the links and all the URLs to Robert's work and everything we talked about here today. Robert, just one more question for you before we wrap up. If you were to say, wake up tomorrow and find that you had none of the resources that you had built, right? But you had all your knowledge, you had everything, but you had none of the resources and context and things like that you've built over the years. What are some of the first things you would do to start something today?
Well, I think one of the first things that I would do is start, again, surrounding myself with the right kind of people. When you talk about the things that I wouldn't have, the one that, the money in the bank is one thing that can always be rebuilt. But when you take away the people, I'm 55 years old this year, and I think about the network of people and the amazing people I've had the chance to work with and work for, and the clients that I've worked with, and the opportunities that I have as a result of that. I think the number one thing that comes to mind is to start rebuilding that network, to start reaching out and stretching myself out of whatever level I'm at now to connect with people who are playing an even bigger game than I am. And then the other thing would be to continue to learn. Even though you told me the one thing I do still have is my knowledge, I would maintain my commitment to continuing to learn and grow. It's one, because I just love to do it, and two, because I think it's so important in today's world with so much information available to us. If we're not continuing to learn and grow, we're going to be falling behind as opposed to either keeping up or getting ahead. So those would be the two things that come to mind.
No, and clearly that strategy has served you well throughout your life. So it's a good one to go ahead and restart if you're starting from scratch in any circumstance. Robert, thank you again for joining us here today. And you're going to be joining us on the Backstage Pass, so we will see you there. And Superstarters, we are going to have Robert and more from him and getting into excellent decision making. So remember, you can join us on the startsomethingshow.com and become a member of our community. Get the Backstage Pass in-depth interviews from all of our experts, along with all the resources that we've created for the self-employed community out there, for our small business owners and entrepreneurs, to support you in living the life of your dreams and having the business that supports it. So we'll see you then, and we'll be back with another awesome show next week.
Start something with purpose. Start something with freedom. Start something now. Go to thestartsomethingshow.com, join our community of superstarters, and get your perfect day planner pack, a free resource to help you create the life you've dreamed of living. Take action now, and we'll see you for our next exciting episode.